Good evening, everyone. We have quite a turnout for tonight's webinar. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Matt Wittern. I work for the management consulting firm Raftellus, and I'm tonight's MC. A few quick housekeeping items before we begin. So this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the city's website. This webinar is an informational session. The formal public hearings on these proposed changes are scheduled for later this summer. We'll share more in details about how to participate at the end of tonight's presentation. We'll also plan to take questions at the end of the presentation. To submit a question, click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, type your question, and hit send. We'll do our best to address as many questions as possible. Before I share tonight's agenda and what we are presenting, I want to introduce the City of Weslaco's Director of Planning and Code Enforcement, Rebecca De La Fuente. Rebecca?
Thank you, Matt, and I want to thank each of you who are joining us here tonight on this webinar. Everyone can see that ours is a city on the grow. Not everyone knows that the last major update to the city's development rules was way back in 2018. Since then, the city's adopted its 2040 comprehensive plan, state laws changed, and Wesco has experienced steady growth driven by health care expansion, logistic activities, and its central Mid-Valley location. A while back, and through a competitive process, the city hired Raftellus to recommend how we can modernize, consolidate, and streamline how the city regulates development. We also asked Raftellus to study whether the adoption of impact fees, like many places in the states already have, might have a role in ensuring that growth pays its fair share. We're excited to present the results of these efforts tonight, so I'll hand the microphone back to Matt. Matt?
Thanks, Rebecca. So tonight, we're going to provide an overview of how new development projects move forward in Weslaco. Then we'll explain why a Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO, is needed, and how adopting impact fees could be a key part of the picture here. We have two of my colleagues with us who I'll introduce here shortly. They will describe their work on the project, what was examined, and what we are recommending be adopted by the City Commission. I'll also recognize Malin Joyner, who is managing things behind the scenes. Thanks, Malin. We'll close by discussing how to participate in public hearings, then take questions from the audience. So, as you all know, Weslaco is at a pivotal point. You are seeing steady population and economic growth, particularly in your healthcare and logistics sectors. And managing this growth is a team effort. City Commission sets the vision and final policy, making sure that new growth aligns with your community's expectations, like those in your 2040 comprehensive plan. Developers propose and build the projects that bring new housing and jobs to your Mid-Valley location. Now, crucially, your advisory boards, like the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee or CIAC, provide an essential layer of oversight. The CIAC includes both residents and development professionals who review your plans for fairness and technical accuracy before they ever reach the commission. This structure ensures that growth isn't just happening to Weslaco, but is being planned by Weslaco. Rebecca's group, the Code Enforcement and Planning Department, serves as the gatekeeper for city growth. Their role is to ensure that every new building or subdivision is safe, functional, and consistent with community standards. Their work relies on clear ordinances. So think of an ordinance as a local law that covers everything from how far a house might be from the street to how much green space a new commercial project needs. The purpose of these ordinances is really simple. It's to protect your property values. It also ensures public safety and preserves the unique character of your neighborhoods and your downtown. So to discuss the work the team performed on modernizing and consolidating ordinances the city has in place, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Elsemarie Mullins. Elsemarie?
Thanks, Matt. I'm Elsemarie Mullins, a senior consultant at Raftellus, and my role on this project was leading the reorganization and update of Weslaco's land use ordinances into now what is the Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO. So what is the UDO, and why did the city do this now? Previously, the regulations governing things like zoning, landscaping, and subdivisions were spread across multiple chapters of the Code of Ordinances, and some of those chapters were out of date. They had old references, or they just didn't reflect the issues that the Planning and Zoning Commission is dealing with today. So the solution was creating one unified document, updated for current state laws, and organized in a way that's much easier to use for developers, for citizens, and for city staff. And the timing matters too. The 89th Texas legislature, which met last year in 2025, passed some significant land use bills. Some of those updates are actually required by law now. So the UDO gave the city the opportunity to address both cleaning up the organization and the legal compliance at the same time. It also reflects the goals of the city's 2040 master plan. So it's not just a compliance exercise, it's also a planning tool. The UDO is organized into 10 chapters, and the goal is that the structure is to separate everything out by theme, so it's really clear where to find what you're looking for. For example, previously, use standards and design standards were sometimes buried inside individual zoning district descriptions. Now, they each have their dedicated chapter, and the zoning district descriptions are still there. In particular, Chapter 8 now holds all the review procedures for permits, plats, and other applications, and they're laid out much more clearly than they were before. Another thing worth noting is that building codes, including fire safety, were updated to reference the 2024 editions, but they will be adopted separately from the UDO. It's because they're really about building inspections and safety and less about zoning, so it made sense to keep them separate. They're referenced in Chapter 1 so you can find them, but they go through their own adoption process separate from the UDO. One of the key features of the UDO that'll make it a lot easier to use is a reorganized use table. Before, a business owner might have had to check 3 or 4 different chapters to figure out whether their type of business was even allowed in a particular location. The use table puts that all in one place. The uses are organized into 4 main categories: residential, commercial, civic and institutional, and industrial. And the table also points you to where more detailed standards are in the document. So for example, childcare homes are listed in the table, but there are also other specific requirements that apply, and the table tells you where to go find them. You can look up what's allowed where and figure out where else you need to go for further details. And the way that this is cross-referenced is a lot easier to navigate than the way it was before. The UDO also standardized the naming of zoning districts, and in some cases split existing districts into more specific ones. This was specifically significant for the residential side. And to be clear up front, if you own property today, your zoning designation hasn't changed overnight. Your use is still fine. What it does is clean up the rules going forward. So the old R2 district, for example, covered everything from duplexes all the way up to large apartment complexes, which are very different types of houses with very different characteristics. So now they're being separated. The apartment complex district, that R2AC, is specific to larger multifamily buildings, while duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes now have their own district. And townhomes and condominiums also have a dedicated district now. There's also the introduction of a new district, the patio homes district, which has a 0 lot line designation. And the mobile home and subdivision and RV parks district was updated to make it clear which regulations are specific to mobile home subdivisions, which ones are specific to RV parks, and which ones apply to both. On the non-residential side, most of the existing business and industrial districts stayed in the same place, but there are 2 new additions worth highlighting. The first is the public zoning district, which covers everything from schools to parks. Having a dedicated district for public uses makes it cleaner for the city to plan and manage those facilities. The second is a historic preservation overlay district. This one is currently empty, meaning no properties have been designated or put in that district yet, but the framework is in place. So if the Historic Preservation Commission wants to designate properties in the future, there's a clear process that's ready to go. The last thing I want to touch on is a few specific standards that got a lot of attention in this update because they're the kinds of things that affect the quality of life for residents. The flood hazard section was updated to meet current FEMA and National Flood Insurance Program requirements. The variances procedures stayed in that chapter, which is actually a FEMA requirement, but everything is current and in one place. The lighting standards are significantly expanded from where they were before. Previously, the language on lighting was fairly limited. Now there's a full standards section that covers fixture type, shielding, and light trespass. The goal is to make sure these standards are clear enough that they're actually enforceable. So, for example, commercial lighting on a busy road doesn't end up being a nuisance to the homes next door. Also, landscaping requirements, which were previously in a totally separate chapter, are now integrated with Chapter 4 alongside other design standards. They're also updated to align with the new district structure, so all the requirements for a given development type are in the same place. This time with the UDO really gave us the opportunity to cross-reference things internally in a way that was consistent and clear. That should make organization a lot easier in the future. With that, I'll turn it back over to Matt.
Very good. Thanks, Else Marie. So let's turn to the topic of who pays for growth. As Weslaco grows, you need more water lines, you need greater sewer capacity, and road improvements to support the growth, just to name a few. So this is where something called impact fees come in. Impact fees are a fair one-time charge paid by developers at the time of construction. This funding method ensures that new development helps pay for the specific infrastructure it requires. The key benefit here is fairness. Impact fees mean that existing residents aren't asked, typically through their taxes, to subsidize the full cost of new development. It allows us to grow without placing the entire financial burden on the families who are already there in Weslaco. It's important to note these fees stay in Weslaco and can only be used for the new infrastructure, not existing infrastructure in need of maintenance or repair. So here to talk in more detail about this is my colleague, Angie Flores. She managed the work on this and also was a key part of including the city's Capital Improvement Advisory Committee, or CIAC, which is required by Texas law. Take it away, Angie.
Thanks, Matt. So I am Angie Flores. I'm a vice president here at Raftellus, and as Matt mentioned, I was leading the effort on the impact fee and meeting with the CIAC. It's been quite the process meeting with the CIAC, several times, which is important for this process. So I'm going to start with what is an impact fee. Matt touched on that a little bit. But really, it is a one-time upfront payment that is paid by typically the builder of a new home in a new development. Impact fees are an additional revenue source to the city, and it helps to pay for the capital costs of new development and those regional facilities that Matt mentioned. In Texas, impact fees are statutorily required to follow the rules in Chapter 395 of the Texas Local Government Code. So we help the city do just that. So again, impact fees are a way for cities to balance the growth that is happening in their city, and allows them to have a revenue source to put in the infrastructure required to serve that growth. It is also a way, it does tend to have some impacts on housing, and I'll explain that here in the future slide. So here's the overall impact fee process. So again, we have to be compliant with Chapter 395, which defines the process for calculating the impact fee. The fee calculation is calculated through the process of developing the capital improvement plan and identifying the costs that are required to serve the growth for the city. Again, as we've mentioned, the CIAC is required to review the process. They review the capital improvement plan. They provide comments into the growth that we're projecting for the city. And then finally, through a set of 2 public hearings, we will go to the City Commission for adoption of the land use assumptions, the capital improvement plan, and the impact fee. They will adopt this fee through an ordinance that will be adopted by the city commissioners. So again, the flow of the money, the city sets the fee. That fee is collected from the developer or the builder. The home buyer does absorb the cost of the impact fee, and this is new home buyers. These are not existing customers on the system. But the home buyer absorbs the cost of that impact fee typically through their mortgage. So what costs are eligible for impact fees? So as Matt mentioned, the revenue from those impact fees stays with the city. Those impact fees have to be deposited into an impact fee fund, and they can only be used again for the projects identified in that 10-year capital improvement plan. The costs that are eligible for those projects include construction, surveying, and engineering costs, any land acquisition costs that may be required to construct the facilities, any other financial advisory or any other engineering costs, and then the impact fee study costs, so the costs that the city has incurred to complete this study or actually become a part of that impact fee. So there are some ongoing Chapter 395 requirements that the city will need to follow once the impact fee is in place. And this is primarily so that, the citizens, the commissioners, the kayak are, fully aware of how the impact fees are being used and how they're being collected. So there is a requirement of a semi-annual report to the kayak and the city commission that will be put together by the staff. There is a requirement for an update at least every 5 years, but no sooner than every 3 years. And a lot of that will be dependent on how different the growth or the capital infrastructure investment is when, after the study has been adopted. There's also a requirement for an independent financial audit prior to any updates to the fee. And again, this just ensures that the city is using those impact fees as they were slated. This shows the impact fee per living unit equivalent that was just recently considered by the kayak. This will be the impact fee that we recommend to the city commission. On this table, you'll see there the impact fee by meter size. A 5/8 inch meter represents 1 living unit equivalent. So the impact fee for that 1 living unit equivalent for water will be $1,818, for wastewater $1,665, for a total of $3,484. So as developers need larger meters, that means they need more capacity on the system. So they pay more based on those increasing living unit equivalents. There is another methodology where the city will be able to analyze the projected flow analysis of the development to calculate those fees. Again, it's important to remember that these fees are paid by new connections and not by existing homeowners. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Matt.
Thanks, Angie. Just a quick programming note here. I haven't seen any questions from the audience come up in the Q&A using the chat feature. So we're getting close to the end here. If there's any questions, please do drop those into the Q&A, and we'll be sure to answer them here on the next slide. But before we get there, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the value of resident input. So your voice is a critical part of this process. We've made all the draft documents available on the city's website for your review. And there are 2 key milestones coming up where you can participate formally. The LUA CIP public hearing will take place on August 18th, starting at 4:30 at City Hall. Then on September 2nd, the commission will have a public hearing starting at 5:30 to discuss impact fees and the Unified Development Ordinance. This will also be at City Hall. Between now and then, you can submit questions or comments through the online form at weslacotx.gov/UDO. We're tracking all feedback to share with City Commission before they make their final decision. So with that, we'll close the formal presentation and open it up to any questions we might have from our audience here. I'll go and check my chat button here. Again, I don't see any questions in the chat, but I think we should probably hang out for a minute or so and see if we get any contributions there. Oh, okay. It looks like we do have a question about, and this might be for Rebecca or for Else Marie. Gabrielle is asking, is the UDO draft on the website?
Do you want to take this one, Rebecca? Or
Yeah, we currently do not have the draft UDO on the website. If you'd like to seek a draft copy, you would have to go through our public information process and file something with our city secretary's department.
So that would just be a phone call to the city secretary, sounds like,
Yeah.
Rebecca? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to turn the questions here for just a few more seconds. And again, I imagine there are city staff available at the main number to route calls and questions about this from residents and stakeholders. Is that right, Rebecca?
Yes, sir, that's correct. We're all familiar with what's being proposed with the UDO, and if anybody has any questions, they're more than welcome to call us at our office, 956-447-3403.
You've read that number a couple times, yeah,
More
in your
than a
life.
couple.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any additional questions here. I did want to say it looks like we've covered a lot of ground tonight. We discussed how the Unified Development Ordinance will simplify city rules and explained how impact fees ensure that growth pays its fair share. So as a reminder, many of the documents and the presentation from tonight are going to be available on the city's website. Please visit the project page to review them. You can also use the online form there to send us more questions or comments. And your input is really vital. So we'll collect all feedback and share it with City Commission before they make any final decisions. We hope to see you at the public hearings this summer. So on behalf of Rebecca and the entire team, thank you for your time and for your interest in the future of Weslaco. Have a great evening.